So my name is Olenka Bilash, and I am the director of the Ukrainian Language Education Centre at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. And last summer, I attended the European Conference on Educational Research that was held in Cyprus. And I had the pleasure of taking a bus ride home with Kateřina. And as we got to talking, we discovered that we had some commonalities in our interest of research, particularly relating to Ukraine. So I invited Kateřina, and then she told me about Klára and her work. And so we're really delighted to have today's presentation with both of you. Let me begin by introducing our colleagues. So Klára Šeďová is a professor of education at Masaryk University in the Czech Republic. She leads a research team working in the field of learning, instruction, and development. And the team has conducted ethnographic observations in Czech schools, as well as interventional studies and large-scale surveys. Recently, she became the scientific director of the National Institute SYRI, congratulations, which focuses on systemic risks in Czech society and their management. Among the topics the Institute has focused on recently are the Ukrainian crisis and the refugee wave to the Czech Republic. Excuse me, Kateřina Machovcová is a researcher and lecturer. In her research, she focuses on well-being, leadership, diversity, and inclusion, particularly within the educational sector, with a special focus on higher education. She is experienced in qualitative research methods, but has participated in a number of mixed methods projects. As a lecturer, she participates in a teacher training program in health education and is involved in teaching social psychology and the prevention of risk behavior. Also, she has been involved in a number of non-governmental initiatives focused on the promotion of gender equality and migrant integration. Welcome to our colleagues, and I'm going to now ask them to share the screen with their PowerPoint presentation, and ask you listeners and observers to save your questions and comments until the final 15 minutes. And also that at the end of the presentation, we will post a feedback, a link for a feedback about the presentation in the chat, and invite you to complete that as soon as possible after the session. So thank you, and the screen is yours.
Thank you very much for inviting us. I just want to check with everyone that you see the screen all right. I'm aiming to get to the presentation mode, which is, do you see it as a presentation? Okay, it's a little bit weird on my side. And now the slides are changing? No. Okay, let me start again, because it seemed it got stuck somehow. Okay, one more time.
Okay.
And now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Sometimes it gets frozen or something. So thank you again very much, not only for a nice chat during the ride in Cyprus, but also really for inviting us and for the opportunity to share our research that we do in the Czech Republic. Just a very brief outline what we are going to do today. Klára will speak a little bit about the general situation of the Ukrainian refugees nowadays, and then we will provide a bit of an overview of two studies. The studies basically complement each other, so I hope that it will contribute nicely to the discussion, and we will definitely have some time for your questions, or we are happy if you follow with emails or discussion later on. So Klára, the floor is yours for now.
Thank you. Good afternoon, or maybe morning for you. Thank you once more for having us. I will start with a few words about the context. As you know, after Russia invaded Ukraine, Czech Republic became a refuge for about 500,000 of Ukrainian refugees. And because Czech Republic has about 10.5 million inhabitants, this made the country the largest receiver of refugees per capita in Europe. At the beginning of the 2022-23 school year, there were nearly 40,000 Ukrainian refugee children enrolled in Czech primary schools, which made this group to be the biggest foreign students group at Czech schools. And I think it's necessary to say that until then, Czech schools had really very limited experience with foreign students. Please show the next slide, Katka. So this was the moment when we started with our research study. We wanted to know how Czech schools approach the adaptation of Ukrainian students, and therefore we designed a multiple case study to examine the immediate response of Czech schools to the Ukrainian refugee influx. We chose 6 primary schools to our sample. All schools were located in Brno, which is the second biggest city of Czech Republic, and this is the city where our institute is located. We decided to choose schools with the highest amount of Ukrainian students at that time, most of them accepted our invitation. So we started to collect data in schools, and the data collection took part from October 2022 to February 2023. It was field research based mainly on interviews with several kinds of participants. In each school, we interviewed the principals. In each school, we interviewed several teachers, especially those of them who had the highest number of Ukrainian students in their classes. We also talked to Ukrainian assistants, we talked to Ukrainian students themselves, and also to their parents. In total, we collected 62 in-depth interviews, and we also observed lessons, we observed some tutoring for Ukrainian students, and we also measured peer relationships in classroom into time point at the beginning of the study and at the end of our data collection. We have already some papers published. Here is link to one of them, but we have also some other papers. So if you would be interested, we can send you more links. Please, Katka, show the next slide. Thank you. So now something about the key findings from this first study. The general approach of Czech schools could be labeled as openness without much reflection. Schools in the sample were friendly and welcoming to refugee students, which in fact led to quite high numbers of Ukrainian refugees enrolled in that schools in our sample, because at the beginning of the refugee influx there were no student placement at the system level. So those schools that were more receptive really received bigger number of Ukrainian students. So this is also what can be seen in the first quotation, the good intention and the strong desire to help to Ukrainian refugees. I think it made us feel good, that we help them right away. Yes, that we help them immediately at the time when perhaps other schools were hesitating. These are words from one of the principals in our study, but we can see also what the second quotation on this slide shows us. And this is the absence of planning or monitoring of adaptation process. When we asked the principal what is adaptation, in his perspective, he said something like, we don't define it. I don't think it's gonna up in casual conversation whether they, Ukrainian students, are adapted or not. So what we can see is really welcoming environment, but not much systematic thinking about how to approach the adaptation process. When we asked people at schools what is important for them when thinking about how students are doing in their school, they very much emphasized their socializing and well-being. They focused on Ukrainian students making friendships in their classroom and being integrated socially into the classrooms. You can see the first citation. I think we do everything we can to make sure that these kids are well received by the collective. Because they didn't really adopt any specific measures to monitor how adaptation is going. When we asked about the outcomes of the adaptation process, they typically were saying something very like, how is adaptation going? Going well. I think they usually look happy. So something really not very clear. When we asked students how they feel to be integrated and how they feel to be received by Czech schoolmates and what are their feeling in their new schools, they were not univocal. There were big differences among them, with some of them saying Czech students are nice, Czech school is nice, and my feelings are good. And I really try hard to make friendships with Czech students because it's good for me and for my future in Czech Republic. This is what is represented by the first citation on this slide, while others, and I think this is not big surprise considering under what circumstances these children came to Czech Republic. So some of them were saying they don't feel to be friendly received in their classroom. They don't feel like having friends, belonging to their classes, etc. Maybe what is interesting on this matter is the fact that teachers typically didn't distinguish between these two groups, and they typically had tendency to think that all students are well integrated, yes, in terms of their social integration. What seemed to be more challenging for Czech teachers was the academic adaptation of Ukrainian students. They very often reported, and they were even quite upset about that they feel unprepared to work with non-native students, which is real situation in Czech Republic, and this is a big lesson the Czech system got from this refugee wave, that Czech teachers really need specific education and specific training to be able to work with foreign students. So teachers very often complain they don't have needed skills, and also they don't get much support or guidance from their leaders and from the Ministry of Education in Czech Republic. As a consequence of this, when asked what a good adaptation means for them, they typically said something like, well-adapted students means he or she doesn't need anything specific, he is not recognizable from Czech students, and I don't need to give him or her any tailored support. So this is how it looked like. This implies a specific situation, and it was easing learning tasks and lowering academic demands for Ukrainian students, because without tailored support, they were unable to participate the lessons as Czech students did. This is quite easy to understand. And what teachers did, even when they assessed the particular student as smart or even genius, as we can see in this quotation, they gave to these students easy tasks to be easy handled by them, and also they gave them good grades for their performance. Now something about how Ukrainian students themselves perceived this situation. They generally appreciated Czech schools. As I showed you previously, not always they appreciated Czech peers, but in terms of Czech teachers, Czech curriculum, Czech schools, they were typically quite satisfied. They reported teachers to striving keeping students happy without overburdening them. Here we can see that they in fact quite precisely reflected the real situation. But they felt this to be fine and nice to them. They regarded Czech curriculum to be easier than Ukrainian. Most of them, nearly everybody of them, told us that the Ukrainian school is more demanding than Czech school, and the Ukrainian curriculum is more overcrowded when compared to Czech curriculum. And they reported they like it. Next slide, please. On the other hand, they also reflected that they are during lessons separated from Czech students in terms the learning tasks that are assigned to them, and that they typically work in one group and Czech students work in other group. And that this is not always good for their development and for their learning. And the second quotation that we placed on this slide is from mother of one Ukrainian student who reflected the situation in school and was quite confused about the fact that her child got A's in school, because she was very well aware that the performance couldn't be the same or even better than the performance of the Czech schoolmates. And because nobody explained to Ukrainian students and to their parents what the grading approach is like, so they were confused about this, and this is maybe also the reason why they regarded Czech school to be so easy, because they didn't really realize that there is some distance between what should be their Czech peers graded for and what they get their grades for. So when we shall summarize the key findings from the Czech study, from the first study, we can say that Czech primary schools managed the influx of Ukrainian students because nearly 95% of them were enrolled very soon after they came to Czech Republic. So Czech system really ensured the enrollment of Ukrainian refugees to school. However, the integration of the students wasn't planned, wasn't monitored, wasn't guided by the Ministry of Education very much. So it was something that occurred spontaneously and was very much driven by the capabilities and by the attitudes of individual schools. Because teachers really were not well equipped by competencies necessary for working with non-native students, schools prioritized social integration and well-being of students. We interpret this finding that way, that it was something that schools thought they could do, that they thought it was easier for them than to focus or emphasize the academic integration of Ukrainian students, even when we think that maybe the schools or people in schools, teachers and principals, weren't always right when assessing the situation of Ukrainian students as cases of good integration or good belonging to schools. However, this is something what they felt they handled better than the academic integration. The academic adaptation saw as something that was challenging for them. I already said how they solved the situation with easing tasks and lowering academic demands, which made the adaptation somewhat easier because Ukrainian students weren't under pressure. But on the other hand, they didn't progress as quickly as they could have, and there remained open question of how they will be able to go from the primary school to the secondary schools. And this was the starting point for our second study, and I am handing over to Katka.
Thank you very much, Klára. So I will continue with the follow-up study where we focused on the process of transitioning between primary school and a secondary school. Let me just explain a little bit about the Czech context at the beginning so that you kind of have a grasp on how important this step actually is. So we have 9 years of compulsory education in the primary school, so everyone has to go through that. And then most children continue, and if you want to have like a reasonable employment or continue for university, you need to continue with a 4-year program, right? And kind of historically, the focus of our educational system is more leaning towards professional types of education than a comprehensive kind of education. So less gymnasiums, more specialized high schools like business high school, healthcare high school, I don't know, technical high school, and so on and so forth. And also what you can see on slide, we have the system also includes 3 years vocational schools. These are basically meant as a training for a trade, for a vocation. Some children continue, but very hardly with more than like some 2 extra years, but they really usually don't go to like university. They're not prepared for that. So this is a very basics of the systems. So to succeed in the Czech, let's say, labor market or educational market, the kids really need to go from the primary school to the secondary school and ideally to a 4-year program. But what's happening in the last few years is that we have a pretty larger cohort of students entering the high education or the secondary education system. So kids who are about 14, 15 of age. So there was some sort of a drop. So the schools were quite okay with the capacity, but like last 3 years, the numbers are rising. And suddenly we have big issues, especially in larger cities like Prague, like Brno, where this study was conducted, and especially for the children who wants to go with a comprehensive education, right? So for instance, in larger cities like Prague, like very big portion of children actually wants to go comprehensive, continue college studies. And so the competition is pretty fierce. And so pretty difficult situation, even for the Czech kids. And then enter the refugee children who need to learn about the new system, find their way about like different types of education, but also what is required for the entrance exam. When we did the research in 2023, there was a very complicated system with 2 applications. Lots of students had to wait for a second round. So it was really very frustrating, even for the local kids with some background. Since 2024, the system is a little bit better in how it's organized. It's like digitalized and works with priorities. Some places in the schools were added, but not so much. So there still is a pressure for kids to have like really excellent results if they want to go comprehensive type of or comprehensive stream of secondary education. And even like the Czech parents, they really need to strategize with the kids, you know, like, do we try this school, which is really good, or do we go a little bit lower, you know, so that you are sure that you can pass, you know. So in this pretty complex and difficult situation, we suddenly have certain number of kids who are like finishing 9th year of a primary school in the Czech Republic, and we tried to follow them and learn more about how they are handling this complex situation. So the design of the study was based on 3 interviews with each participant. We did 1 interview shortly before the actual exam. The exams are unified, so not for all of the schools. There may be art schools who might be a little bit special, but for most of the schools, you just do the same exam from math and from the Czech language. And so we did 1 interview shortly before the exam. So we learn about like their strategies, how they pick the schools, how they're studying for the exam. We did 1 interview quite right after they knew the results from this first round of the process, the first round of doing the tests and everything. So we knew about their results, whether they are looking forward to the school or what are their backup strategies and so on and so forth. And then we tried to do a 3rd interview about 1 year after the 2nd interview. So sometime closer to the end of their first year, ideally their first year in a secondary school, so that we also know something about how it was for them when they started at the school, if they managed to stay in the school. In the little table, you can see the participants, and you can see how many interviews we have. Obviously, we lost quite a few kids with the 3rd interview, so not everyone has all 3 interviews. But I guess this is the problem of these kind of longitudinal studies, that it's difficult to keep all of the participants. One last thing before I move to the next slide. We did the interviews at 2 locations. One was Brno, the same place where in the first study that Klára explained, this is a larger university study. And the second group, there are like 5 students from a smaller city, which is like a pretty okay place, not like excluded location or anything like that, closer to the capital city, but a small place where there are some secondary schools, there's like no university, so the demographics of the city is, and the services and stuff available is a little bit different. And let me start with a very brief overview of the 4 groups or 4 trajectories of the students that we found, and then we'll split again with Klára explaining a little bit more in detail about each group. So we have like 4 groups that we at the moment named as the first one, unrealized potential. So essentially students who we think can study as a more competitive school than they are actually studying. The second is kids that we called, the situation we called grateful pragmatism. So they're kind of happy with what they got. Some of them maybe are in a little bit better situation than if they were at the Ukrainian. Maybe they had a little bit higher aspirations here, managing with some support in the school. But they're essentially like quite fine. The third group is called committed to success, and those are very hardworking kids, very focused on further education. And then we have the last group, and those are all of the kids who are there. We didn't get them for the third interview, and I assume for some reason. And those are kids who were really struggling in the Czech system and whom we know to have a very a difficult path through the educational system. So I will pass the word again back to Klára for the first group.
Thank you, Katka. So I will say a few words about the first group. Maybe I would like even more emphasize that we were quite surprised about how varied the students were in how they experienced their transition from primary school to secondary school, because we expected this to be a problematic process. But what we found was really very multicolored landscape of how they were doing. So the first group, students with what we call as unrealized potential. These were students who demonstrated quite good adaptation in their primary schools. They had strong academic performance, even in the light of what I said previously about how Ukrainian refugees were graded in their schools. So these were children who got A's in their schools and were labeled
I need to be on this call. I just forgot about it.
Sorry, someone's mic is not.
Is it okay?
I think it's okay now.
Yeah, okay. So they were getting good grades. They were praised by their teachers. They had good relationships with their teachers. They felt supported by them, and even in the second or third interviews, these students typically reported their memories about teachers from their primary schools. And they were diligently preparing for the entrance exams. At the same time, these were students with really clearly formulated aspirations, both professional and educational. There were 3 students in this group. One of them wanted to become a teacher, and 2 of them wanted to become IT specialists. It means that they're aimed for professions requiring high level of education and qualification. The entrance exams were partly successful, partly unsuccessful for them. One of these 3 students was accepted for his dream school, for the school of his first choice, for the IT school. The second one wasn't accepted for the most competitive comprehensive stream, which Katka was talking about. But reapplied, and in the second round of entrance exam was accepted for graphical design school. And the third member of this group was the most unlucky of them. He wasn't accepted for a secondary school of his choice, and then he stopped to apply, and then we lost contact with them. The last thing we know was that he continued his study of Ukrainian online school, and he still was committed to be an IT specialist and wanted to educate himself non-formally via internet courses, etc. So now I can talk about the two students who continued their education in Czech secondary schools, and what was common for them, even when one of them started to study his dream school and the second one didn't. So both of them started to be disappointed after the school year began. Not yet, Katka. Both of them reported they don't like the curriculum. They are disappointed about low academic demands of their secondary schools. They don't feel their schools are relevant for their future. And also, they started to feel detached from their classmates, and this made them also to doubt about their future in Czech Republic, and they started to talk about moving somewhere abroad or back to Ukraine or further to the West. We can show some quotation. Please show next slide. Thank you. This is the quotation of the boy who wanted to study comprehensive stream, but now he's studying graphical design, and he says something like, "Well, I'm okay. This is not great, but what can I do when I am here? I want to graduate, and I want to have a high school diploma," because he still keeps his aspiration for being a teacher. But what he also said was, "I have a big problem because for me studying at this school feels too easy." And he had the experience with the secondary school entrance exam when because of his primary school preparation was too easy. He wasn't able to be accepted for the comprehensive stream, and now he's at the situation when he again gets only A's in his school, but he's afraid of whether he will be prepared enough to enter university after the secondary school. So this is to document the insecurities and doubts of the students about their schools and the relevancy of their learning there. And on the next slide, we can see the feeling of detachment from the classmates. This is the quotation of student Jaroslav, who was very well integrated in his class. When he was at primary school, he was a member of a group of 4 or 5 friends. He was only Ukrainian there. The other were Czech boys, and they were big friends and spent leisure time together. But now, when he started to study secondary school, he wasn't able to find real friends in the class, and the common topic what he was talking about with the one or two classmates that he was talking with was that they don't like the rest of the class. So what we can see here is really the feeling of non-belonging to the class. And maybe it's worth noting that the other student from this group refers to Czech students as childish, because they have completely different kind of experiences and different kind of life situation when compared to the Ukrainian refugees. So now something about the second group that we called to be grateful pragmatists. These children were completely different from the first group. Their academic adaptation in primary school was rather weak, and their achievement was rather low. Again, please understand it in the light what I said previously. It didn't mean that they were about to fail. They had C or B or something like that. But it was clear that they are not as advanced as the previous group. Their career and educational aspirations were quite unclear. When we asked them during the first interviews what they want to be, what they want to do for a living in the future, they typically mentioned several very different professions. For example, I want to be a medicine doctor or baker or something like that. Yeah, that were really very, very different positions mentioned in the first interviews. And what they finally did was choosing secondary school based on advice from someone who was important for them, or based on imitation of other students from their schools or other Ukrainian students from their schools. So it wasn't the outcome of very careful consideration that we saw with students from the first group. Their intention was avoid failure, which means they didn't apply for very competitive streams. And also, when thinking about what school they will apply for, they were thinking about whether the school isn't too demanding, whether they will, for example, need to learn English at that school, or Russian will be okay, or something like that. So these concerns were really pragmatic. What happened after their started study? We were quite surprised with the development, because everything improved for them, which was in contradiction to the first group. They started to be satisfied with their studies, even when they studied schools that were not of their primary choice, and that were results of, for example, second round of entrance exams or something like that. So they started to appreciate both curriculum, both their future professional orientation, and what was also typical for this group was that they started to feel a sense of belonging to the school, to their schoolmates. They started to build good relationship with Czech peers, which was something that wasn't so developed for this group when they were at primary schools. We will show you some quotations again. Here you can see that these students were applying simply for the schools that were near, or that were applied by their schoolmates, or they were advised by their principals or teachers, etc. And here we can see what happened after they were accepted for these not carefully selected schools. They started to like it. How do you like your secondary school overall? I really like it right from the start, and when time went on, I liked it more and more. Then researcher asked, what do you want to do in the future? And this was the example of student who really didn't know what he wants to be when asked during the first interview. And here we can see that he wants to be a pastry chef, which is exactly what the school program he's studying now is designed for. So he identifies himself with his school choice, which was quite random at the beginning, but is completely accepted at the moment of the third interview. Thank you, and I'm handing over to Katka.
Thank you very much. So the third group that I mentioned already, we called Committed to Success. And these students are really like a super hard working. They mobilize all of the resources that are available to them, both in the Czech Republic and in Ukraine. I think that this is very interesting that some of the kids, for instance, have tutors or they can consult things in the Ukraine. Part of the story is that they usually kept studying both in the Czech and Ukrainian school, which put an extra challenge on them. On the other hand, it allowed them to have some extra resources because maybe they were faster in mathematics in Ukraine than in Czech Republic, so it gave them some advantage. It also meant that they still sort of kept doors open in case they would want to come back to Ukraine, you know, so it's not like complete like a detachment from the home country. And it also gave them some opportunities in Czech system because usually the Ukrainian education is being nostrified here. So the kids can go right away to the university, even they are a little bit younger than the Czech peers, right? So there's even opportunity for the kids. And some of them actually mentioned that in the interviews, that they start studying at high school in the Czech system, but on a side, they want to finish the Ukrainian system and then maybe decide to jump ahead for the university, you know. And so they were like playing with more like options. And I want to say that at some moments, it seemed that they really put ahead like their studying on expense of maybe some social relationships, you know. And so let me also show you some quotes. These are little pieces from two interviews. One is with Sasha, and why I choose this is that he made such a really informed choice about what's better for him to study for the high school. You know, this is something that is not clear to some Czech parents, you know, and he was very clear. I want to go university. I want to go medical direction. It's much better to do gymnasium. Even though there's like a good, like a high school with a medical focus, it's not good enough. It's better to do gymnasium. And the second two are from the interview with Veronica. And first, I just wanted to illustrate that some of these kids, they were surprised how slow we are in the Czech schools. They were far ahead in some disciplines, you know, but they could use this as an advantage, really, for instance, with entrance exams, right? And the last one, this is the illustration of where I spoke about they're prioritizing sometimes the academic and not the social, like she could go to a school trip. She decided to stay at home, work on some project, which was difficult for her because it was history and the Czech history. So this completely new topic. So these students, they really try to do as much as possible with a very strong vision for studying at a university as their like next step. And they were kind of happy to be in the Czech Republic because they could study within the publicly funded system, which wouldn't be possible where they were in Ukraine. And this is the last group. I just want to speak very briefly about them because I said we don't have the 3 interviews. And those are typically the students who were somehow struggling. Either they were disoriented with the system or they might knew a little bit about the system, but somehow their entrance into the Czech system was delayed. So they, you know, a lot of kids, they expected they'll be back after the summer. So they didn't start a Czech school until it turns out that the war is not going to end, not in a few months, might not even a few years. So they only after decided they will go to school, but they lost a few months of the beginning where the support was the strongest, right? And so it continued creating like a difficult problems. So 2 examples, one from Ilya. After with the first interview, when they were supposed to have the applications in already, he's like, yeah, I haven't applied yet. I somehow missed the deadline. I will just wait for the second round, right? And then it seemed like he never really did apply in the second round anyway. Or the second example, so which school did you apply for? Yeah, I don't know. My dad did the application. So completely like lost in the situation, someone else making decisions for them. So because our time's like running up, I just want to say like a few concluding words, maybe temporarily concluding words. As Klára said, we were quite surprised to get this scale of like different trajectories, and I assume there might be even more diversity, although I think that we got like a pretty good scope with the data that we have. And it's obvious that for the students who are most focused on their education, there's the key goal, the university. Some of them maybe even heard about someone before who studied at the university in the Czech Republic, you know. So there was already maybe some image in their head, I would say. And they were really able to very actively come and find the sources, very proactively, you know, really go to seek people in the school, not wait until someone tells them something, but actually seek them and ask for this information and that information. What is a little bit sad and confusing is that sometimes the aspiration could come with a disappointment for the kids who didn't pass the exams that well and who might have needed more support or maybe need to retry in the next year, but that also might need that they will lose some years into education. But we don't think that they are getting any specific support. So it's more like, let's try to make it, you know. And the last group is a bit worried because it really suggests how the support in the Czech school system was quite temporary. You know, there was this big wave of support at the very beginning, but and those who grabbed it and moved, though those are doing maybe reasonably okay. But for the kids for whom the beginning was difficult, maybe their personal situations more complicated or something like that, some of them are really on the way to become isolated, maybe not working, not in the education, and struggling in a broader sense, which is obviously quite worrying. And I want to stop here, and I want to give at least some space that we have left for the discussions and or questions. And of course, we are absolutely happy if you're gonna get in touch and if we continue some conversations after this session.
Well, thank you so much. This was really enlightening, and I will make a few additional comments a little later. But right now, I want to make sure that our participants have an opportunity to ask any questions they might have. May I ask you to maybe close the screen so we can see the participants and any hands that might be raised? So far, no hands, so I'll begin with a question. Looking at some of the comments from the students, I wonder if you looked at any of the data in terms of them having experienced trauma.
I think it's more question for Katka because she is psychologist. We were talking about it. Well, Katka, comment it, please.
Yes, we had a big discussions about that also in terms of like providing some safety background for the students, you know, and support if needed. But it wouldn't be possible in the context where we worked to actually focus the study directly on this, right? So we really quite consciously diverted the discussions towards education, Czech learning, and so on and so forth. We would probably need a clinical psychologist or someone else if we want to go deeper in these issues. So honestly, I suspect in some way, I do think that all of the kids went through the trauma because they have to very abruptly like take everything they have. Very often dads stay at home, you know, so the situation as such is very traumatic. But I suspect that some of the kids, especially in the last group, are those who actually would need a psychological help and maybe treated for depression or post-traumatic stress reaction. Yes.
Thank you. And I have another question then. In Canada, we are probably more accustomed to receiving refugees. And so we do have perhaps more systematic touch points and people in place to help teachers, parents, and students. You mentioned that you did not have that, but I wonder if one of the results of your study might have been to be able to put some of these things into place within your systems.
So I'm just very broadly said, we work with a lot of decision makers. I don't know if Klára, do you want to add on this maybe? Yeah.
Yeah, we discussed our findings with a lot of decision makers. As Katka said, they were interested very much. I think this was really like momentum for Czech educational system, because we really learned a lot, and we found out that we are able to handle situation like this, but thanks to huge effort on the side of teachers, and there is really lack of support, lack of methodological guidance for teachers, and this is something which is really changing these days. And for example, there are even university programs for teachers of Czech language for non-native students, which were in the past very rare, and now these programs are attended by bigger group of students. So I think that things are really moving in Czech system. What was also very helpful in that situation was the fact that in Czech Republic there is already quite big Ukrainian community, and the schools were able to find Ukrainian assistants for their Ukrainian students, and these Ukrainian assistants who were hired by the schools served as mediators between children and their new school environment. And again, this position started to be supported by Czech Ministry of Education, and even after the strongest support for schools ended, those schools who have a high number of Ukrainian students enrolled can get money for the Ukrainian assistants and keep them. So this is again something that changed, and our papers were part of this discussion.
Any other questions or comments from our listeners? I'm sure that many of us are curious about how many of those students and families, particularly maybe with the parents, were intending to go back to Ukraine, or if they're, after now almost 3 years, beginning to feel more rooted in the Czech.
This is not a question for us. We should look at official statistics, but we were also talking with both students and teachers about this very cautiously, but we asked about that. And what was I would say I liked it was the fact that teachers said, it doesn't make difference for me whether they will stay or they will go back. They are here, and I have to take care of them. So this wasn't something that schools focused very much on.
Yeah, just I think the very rough statistics would speak about something like about 350,000 people after the last census. So quite a portion of the people came temporarily and came back, especially I would say when they had smaller children and it was difficult to, work and support themselves and take care of small children without like the family network. So there are like returns. I think that once the kids spend already some time in the Czech schools, it's difficult to go back. Yeah.
Okay. Pavel, please unmute yourself. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Dear colleagues, thank you very much for your presentation. Brilliant job, researcher. Thank you very much. I'm researcher from University of Lower Silesia in Poland, Wrocław. I'm from Education Migration Central Europe Research Group. And we have similar research projects. So it's really nice to hear about your project, about your experience, tools, methodological context. It's impressive. So I have no question. I have just a few good words to colleagues, researchers. That's brilliant job. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
thank you, Pavel. I know that your group has agreed to do a presentation for us sometime in the future. So we look forward to hearing more about your research.
Yeah, we will do that. Thank you very much for the invitation.
So on that note, I'm mindful of the time. I want to thank Kateřina and Klára again for a very engaging and insightful study. I personally especially appreciated the presentation of the context in Czech Republic. It's very important when we're especially comparing across different education systems to understand that. I also really appreciated that your data collection and interpretation and analysis has reached the points where we can see these different groups of student experiences and emerging. And the idea of being able to do any longitudinal study is so rare for us in this field. So I think, especially grateful for that. It was very beyond interesting. And I know a few people have already sent me text messages saying, let's keep learning more and working together. So thank you very much. Maria has already put in the chat a link for our feedback. That feedback helps us to be able to continue these programs. So we are grateful for your support. Thank you again, and let's stay in touch. Thanks to everyone. Have a great day or evening wherever you are.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
for your
much. Take
attention.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye.